All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ann Shevlin. I'm newly appointed to this committee as a city councilor and chair. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know each one of you. We'll do some introductions while we do a roll call in just a little bit. But I look forward to working with you on the task force and moving forward for the next year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt. And so check this in. Before we do that, we've got a few folks that are in the peanut gallery. Gina, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gina Froha. I'm the assistant city manager.
And so glad to have everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So by way of agenda, this is what was circulated previously with no changes. We're looking at two items today, one relevant to the Coffee Creek Urban Renewal Plan and the other relevant to the WIN program, which is an urban renewal program, not a plan per se. We can talk more about that in a moment, but I think it's worth stating at the outset here, some of you have been participants on the Urban Renewal Task Force in the past. Some of you have not. Some of you have had your organization participate on this task force, but you personally may have not participated. But Wilsonville convenes the Urban Renewal Task Force on an ad hoc basis. This is not a standing committee. The membership is appointed by the city manager. And the intent is to collect input on the city's responsible use of urban renewal throughout the city and throughout time. Currently, and as we move into the future, there's basically four main constituent groups that we try to involve. Residents at large, the brokerage and development community, property owners, and the taxing districts, all of which are invested sometimes literally in this process. And so hopefully as you sit here today, you can you wear one of those caps. So thank you. Some of you multiple. So as far as roll call goes, this is just sort of for the public record. We're going to do grade school style attendance call here, and so just indicate whether or not you're here when your name is called. So Councilor Shevlin.
Here.
Commissioner Carr. Not here. Stu Peterson. Here. Stephen Klein. Here. Oh, we've got a spot for you here. Go ahead and come sit at the table. And if you have one of these papers in front of you, if you could fold it into a tent, just so others can see what your name is and what your affiliation is, that'd be awesome. Andy Kangas. Here. Mark Hush. Here. Rob Hatch. Thanks. Not sick. Okay, we'll give him an excused absence. Ryan Shera. Here. Sorry for missing the C in your name. I got it right on your name. It's common, actually. I got it right on your name. Lauren Jones. Yeah. Laura Edmonds, I think, has a delegate today, and that's Rebecca.
Hi, yes.
Thank you. Joining us remotely. Adrian, I forget how to pronounce your last name.
Chalet.
Chalet. Almost like a ski chalet.
There's an accent on it.
Chalet. Okay.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Schaefer. Here. And then TVFNR, Chief Fail is not here, but
Stephen Myers is.
Stephen Myers.
Neither Jacob nor Chief Fail, but.
Oh, okay. If you want, you can fold that backwards and write your name on it. That'd work. Perfect. Thank you so much. See if I better move this over. Remo Douglas from the school district. Thank you. And then Gary Bennett from Sherwood School District. Not here. Christine Reynolds is not able to join us today, and I don't think she's online either. No. Dick Spence. Here. John McGarza. Here. Susan Myers.
Here, and I'm a property owner, not a resident. I don't live in this.
Okay. Okay. I thought you were both. Pardon me.
I've just been here a long time.
We'll make that correction.
Thank you.
And thank you for noting it. Josh Tompkins.
Here.
Thank you so much. Sam Thomas.
Here.
And just for everyone's sober knows, Sam is specifically handles industrial lands with Business Oregon. I don't think Brett is here, but Nick is. Nick.
Yep, I'm here as Brett's proxy today. Thanks.
Thank you, from GPI. And then Elizabeth, I think, is also on vacation, so we'll note that as well. My name is Matt Lorenzen. I'm the city's economic development manager, and as part of my job description, I oversee the city's urban renewal programming and implementation. And then Gina, introduce yourself. Anything else you'd like to say, Chair?
Well, again, welcome. Matt's gonna help me through this. This is my first task force that I'm chairing, so he'll either elbow me or something if I forget some protocol. But I appreciate everyone being here. Thank you for all of those that were able to join us remotely, and actually thank you to all of you because it was kind of a short notice, but it's a good way to kick off the beginning of the year, right? And we've got some good stuff to talk about today. If you're remote, I'm sure that we'll be watching the screen, and if you have a hand raise option on your screen, then please use that, or otherwise, I guess just speak up if we're not paying attention to you.
I think that's a good, if you're remote and you want to chime in, please just get our attention because it's not guaranteed we're gonna notice. But we can hear you. So yeah.
So with that, we'll just move right into the task force discussion and recommendation and agenda item number 1.
Thank you. All right, so the proportions on the screen are a little bit squished, but otherwise the image is accurate. We're here again to talk specifically about some issues relevant to Coffee Creek, and then later we'll cover our WIN program. As part of and this was included in your memo, I won't ask you to raise your hand if you read the memo, but I hope that you cracked it open at least a little bit before you got here. I'm not going to go through everything that's in the memo, but I'll cover the high points to provide context for the discussion today. So the Coffee Creek planning area came into the UGB and within Wilsonville's future jurisdiction in the early 2000s. And here we are in 2026. And these colors that you see represent the different land ownership configurations. This is a couple years out of date, so there might be slight changes, but for the most part, this remains accurate. What I'm attempting to demonstrate here is the sort of tapestry of ownership that you find. Many owners, strange sized lots. It creates challenges for development in aggregating property when you have such disparate ownership, and the current owners may have different timelines or motivations for selling, if they're even selling at all. And maybe you have one next door that wants to sell, but the other won't. And so it's just very difficult to aggregate land in the area, and that's proven difficult over time. And so that speaks to the issue of parcelization. The other challenge that I want to speak to is contractor establishments, and I don't mean to categorize contractor establishments in any way as like inherently bad or evil, but nonetheless, they present an obstacle to the realization of the vision for this area, which is to be an urban industrial area. And so these contractor establishments are happy to be there. They have a legal right to be there. Many of the landowners in the area lease to contractor establishments, and those landowners are happy with the revenues they receive in rents. It's sort of a mutually beneficial scenario between tenant and landlord, and these create sticky uses that are sometimes just slow to transition over time. And then finally, what I'm calling land value discrepancies, because many of these properties are used as income properties, kind of the way sometimes we regular people own a rental home and it becomes a second source of income. These are income properties, and when they're valued from an appraisal standpoint as an income property, Oftentimes the value could be set at a certain rate, but then for a developer to come in and buy that land, the residual land value to them as just a development site is much lower. And so you've got a seller requiring one price, a developer that can pay another price, and they can't meet in the middle. And so again, the status quo prevails. So these are the main challenges that are causing a slow development pattern within the Coffee Creek area. To demonstrate, even though this area has been master planned for well over a decade, and then has had an urban renewal area in place for nearly a decade, the only development that's occurred in line with the master plan exists at the start locations there. This arrow up on the upper right represents the former UHS site. So there was a hospital originally sited here, a psychiatric hospital. For reasons we don't need to dive into, they withdrew their application, but it's annexed into the city, ready for development, owned locally, and ripe for development by most standards. It's about 8 acres plus or minus. And then this other holding, Schnitzer Properties, has purchased and holds, it's about 10 acres plus or minus. It represents both of those pink properties there. They would love to aggregate and develop in the area, but have faced the challenges I described earlier, as well as perhaps others I'm not certain.
There's other challenges.
In light of all of this that I've just shared, in late 2022, this task force, albeit a different iteration of it, made a recommendation that said that whereas the current urban renewal plan really only calls for projects that are infrastructure related, that the plan ought to get a new project authorized under it related to, and sorry again for the, I guess I can't move that. Moves on my screen, but not on that screen. At any rate, land assembly activities ought to be authorized under the urban renewal plan. In other words, the urban renewal agency ought to be authorized to purchase property, aggregate property, hold property, encumber property, dispose of property in order to expedite development within the area. And it was sort of left at that. A lot of focus in the past couple of years shifted toward town center. We'll talk about town center late in the meeting, but energy has shifted away from that for the moment back to Coffee Creek and some of these other items that were recommendations under the strategic plan. So with assistance from our legal department, we've developed some language to be incorporated into the urban renewal plan by the standards of the urban renewal plan itself. So there are statutory requirements that govern urban renewal, and then there are local ones that are applicable just by virtue of being included in the local plan. In the Coffee Creek plan, there are minor amendments, council approved amendments, and substantial amendments, each with different processes. This falls into the category of a council approved amendment, which says that it should be brought first to this task force and then to the city council for their review before it's adopted. The language we've developed is that the land aggregation project should be added, which states that the agency may acquire, option, prepare, including but not limited to pursuing land use actions, aggregate, hold, sell, resell, and or encumber real property in the area. And then I've just added a footnote here, which appears in the amended plan language as well, that says this doesn't authorize eminent domain. The city is not authorized to go and condemn or take property. Any property purchase would be done from a willing seller and disposed of through a public and transparent process as well. No backroom deals. It would be an RFP type situation. That's all outlined in state statute as well as the Coffee Creek plan itself. So this is where I want to pause and invite, I guess, discussion about number one, the concept itself, because we haven't revisited it since we met as the task force in 2022. And then more specifically, the language that's on the screen, if there's anything that feels off, that needs to be changed in some way before it goes to the council for their consideration. So I'll open the floor at this point for your thoughts and insights.
Can you talk about the timing on this urban renewal district? Like how long is it? And why is it important to do this now in light of the timeline?
Sure. Yeah, that's helpful context, so thank you. The plan was adopted in 2016, so we're coming up right this year on a decade of existence. As far as increment goes, this year we will collect about between $800,000 and $900,000 of increment. And so that increment is what we use to service debt. So far, the plan has only completed one project, and that's mainly due to lack of increment and money to service debt. That was the Garden Acres project. And if we go back, unfortunately, it doesn't show well on this screen, but there's right of way that goes right up through here. And the city built that out to 2/3 width. The site of that, or excuse me, the side of the street that gets the most benefit from those improvements is the east side, because that's where curbs, planters, bicycle lane, etc. were constructed. The west side of the street still benefits from having all of the so-called wet infrastructure in the ground, pipes and so forth. But as those properties develop, they'll be compelled to build the other third of the street, as it were. The maximum indebtedness for this plan area is $67 million, and roughly $5 million of that was used toward the Garden Acres project. This plan has a 30-year duration, so 20 years remaining on the plan. And then, Susie, to address your question about urgency. So the goal of urban renewal, of course, is to revitalize an area that's not economically performing or that is otherwise blighted, as it's called in state statute. As a secondary, or perhaps right even with that goal, the goal of urban renewal is to build a stronger tax base. And that occurs through private development that's of a higher value per acre than what currently exists there today. Right now, most of this property is outside the city and not benefiting the city's budget. When it develops, it comes into the city and benefits all taxing district budgets. The worst case scenario, I suppose, without intervention from the city, is that we continue to see this slow pace of development, and ultimately the area continues to underperform. We will continue to slowly build increment and do more infrastructure projects, and hopefully that will spur more development. But if it doesn't, now we've spent urban renewal dollars on infrastructure projects, but haven't seen the development to build the revenue side of things. And so the urgency here is to try to motivate sellers to sell, to play a role that the private sector doesn't seem capable of performing at this point. You know, a saying that goes around in economic development is that capital flows along the path of least resistance. And so when you have speculative developers or others, they're going to bring their money to places where they can put it to work quickly. And if there's anyone in the room that can correct me on this, I invite you. That's why you're here today. But it's hard for the private sector to sink, say, $5 or $10 million into a site that they can't build on anytime in the foreseeable future for a need, because they need to aggregate and create a more workable and financially feasible development site. So that's really the goal, is to do something that the private sector is challenged to do at this point, facilitate the sale of property. One last point that was included in the memo here is that I mentioned earlier this land value discrepancy issue. So to put it very succinctly, there's a likely scenario that the city would be buying high and selling at some point lower. And so that, of course, counts as a loss against the city's books. fortunately, and Sam is here to speak for Business Oregon if that's required. But the city is already approved under a program at Business Oregon that allows us to do land preparation activities, and land assembly is one of those approved activities. And so we can so the sequencing would be that we would buy and aggregate property or buy property, say, adjacent to a site that is hoping to aggregate. And then resell at that fair reuse value. Then once development occurs and jobs arrive at that site, then we can apply to Business Oregon to recoup our loss for those dollars that we have realized on our books. So there is a delayed timeline, but there is a path to getting back the dollars that we have lost by buying high and selling low, if you want to think of it in those terms. Other questions or
John's
comments?
got his.
Is that Day Road where the arrow is?
Day Road is the northern boundary of the
Yeah.
urban renewal area.
That is, because I was just putting in my mind. Which different roads are where. That's what.
Okay.
Cut for a minute anyway.
I have a question. Peter Stellar. Peter County is,
So
I signed up, you know, I'm not this.
as much as I would.
Well, so he said signed up, but he's not on the list, so, this is a task force where we don't invite, comments from the public, but we'll be happy to discuss with you after you are attended. Anyone can have,
It's just that membership on the task force is not open for self nomination.
You were invited.
I did not.
Oh.
But we're glad you're here.
Is it possible that Stephen forwarded
I might have.
the?
Text your questions.
But we're still interested in it, and we'll just gather it.
I was just asking a question. So that's not public input.
I'll let you go with that one.
I think in order to maintain protocol into the future, we should stick to
Thank you. Okay. We'll go
sure.
for 6 minutes. Do
Yeah,
that
sure,
very
Sean,
quick.
thank you, and I just want to thank, staff, this is really informative, I'm a 10-year resident here, live in Belvoir. And I've seen what, Urban Renewal's done, and I'll tell you, as I drive around and I look at the businesses that we have here and then the developers in our community, I mean, I'm grateful that you're here, and I think I really support this. I think that, you know, we don't have a lot of tools in the toolbox when it comes to aggregation for Oregon, and how do we make that happen? So I commend staff and the counselor to think about moving this forward, because it's a great opportunity for us as a resident in Wilsonville to think about, you know, this space I drive by it, and it just, you know, it's ready. We just need, I think, some tools for our community to be able to move that forward there. So I really do support this, and I think it's a great move for us as a city. At the end of the day, we're gonna have more, you know, the sooner we can have this happen here, the more tax revenue that's gonna come back to that area to have that develop, you know, and we got the state here, we got Coca-Cola, we got Mentor Graphics, we got David Fritz, we got Schnitzer here. I mean, we got regional players, and we need to be looking at this to have this place move forward. So I support it and appreciate being here today.
Stu?
Yeah, I was gonna bring up, when you said it was, you identify specific property, so do you, when you identify them, do you have a specific price that you can offer on there?
That would all be negotiated. There's no,
So you identify the property, then go negotiate it, you don't come in with a pre-authorized amount that you can spend.
yeah, so what we're doing today is just setting the framework to allow staff to go out and have conversations with the brokerage and ownership in the area. To see where there may be willing sellers, where there may be potential transactions possible. We may talk to the brokerage community and find out that everyone just wants to stay put, in which case we'll have to live with that. But through what I've learned from the brokerage community is that there are potential sellers in the area, but the terms need to match their expectations, and that's where there seems to be a disconnect.
Yeah, and that's why I said, you know, if the potential seller finds out there's a finite amount of money to spend. I mean, that's what he's gonna be going for, if it's palatable to him, if it's not, he's not gonna go there, so that's what I'm trying to say. If you don't have a specific amount, you're just gonna go negotiate, that's fine, but if you do, and you have to put it in record, it's not a great way to negotiate.
Right, yeah, no, it would be negotiated. The only finite number at play here is that, again, we have limited debt capacity in this area. So we, even though we have a $67 million maximum indebtedness, we don't have all of that available to us right now. We can only take on the debt we can service, just like when you apply for your home loan, you know, they're gonna underwrite you and see what you can pay. And we're in that same situation. So, so our ability to execute here is limited by dollar amounts, but we don't know exactly what those parameters are right now. Because of course, just like with a mortgage, if you take a 20-year note versus a 30-year note, your payment changes. And so we'll have to work with our financing partners and our finance department as well to figure out whether or not we can make a deal work. This is really like just the administrative bureaucratic pieces that have to be in place to see if we can actually do what we're aiming to do.
We can have those conversations. I wanna go to Adrian and then we'll come back over to Susan.
Well, just starting by echoing John's sentiment, and congratulations to the team for moving this forward and advancing economic development priorities here at the city in a creative way. It's really impressive. I was curious about, I appreciate the RISIS program from Business Oregon, and you mentioned that that's a future possibility. So it's encouraging to see, you know, SAM brought along throughout the process. But just curious if the city does have a contingency plan for, you know, is that program indefinite? How can we as a task force support to ensure that that program is maintained as an option? And, you know, what are the limitations within those funding availabilities from Business Oregon? Just to consider as you move forward negotiations.
Yeah, so Sam, you're the subject matter expert, so I'm gonna call on you, but I understand that we're in the program at this point. And so we have, for lack of a better term, a legal claim to the dollars we've been approved for. Is that accurate?
So the city of Wilsonville does have a current RISIS agreement for the Coffee Creek area and including these parcels here. The way the program works is that if the city invests money in site readiness in industrial lands, once an employer is on the property, whether the city owns the property or not, and the city makes investments in like water, wastewater, road infrastructure, those costs can be sent to Business Oregon. And then once there's jobs and wages on the site, the program has an annual $10 million cap. And so, you know, it depends on the investment and it depends on the number of jobs. So it changes every year for the calculation, but that program was reauthorized so that we're allowing some new applications in, but the existing application that's in from the city of Wilsonville, we're looking at working with Matt and his team on including land aggregation as an allowed activity.
That answer your
Yes,
question?
that it's been approved, you are in.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Then we'll go to Susan and then Dick. So we'll go over here first.
And I was going to go back to what Stu was asking and to clarify, you're asking this task force, do we approve this language that's up here? Just that paragraph or sentence be added to the plan. So it does not include specific numbers or anything like that.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's right. So any execution of this concept would come back to this task force and the city council for approval. So this does not authorize the purchase of any expenditure of funds. It's just putting into place the process.
The needed language to do it.
Correct.
And it allows you to have the conversations.
Right.
Basically. Dick?
I just said, are we also looking at possible buyers, or we're just not even thinking about somebody who might come in and buy the land?
So we have a few developers in the room. I want to turn that question to them and say, if there was a site with served by infrastructure of a workable size and shape, is there demand for it in the market today?
Yes.
Yes.
It's 3 yes.
There you go.
Yeah, well, that makes you go.
Yeah.
Shall we go, Mark?
Yeah.
I guess I'm just off the cuff, I have like two concerns, like one, the existing business, although they're ugly, like, where are they gonna go? I mean, those are obviously people employing people in the city of Wilsonville today, even though they think that uses are dirty, they're not utilizing the land to its highest best use of it. I mean, I think we should think about, so where those companies gonna be placed, is there a place for?
Valid question.
And
Do you want me to respond to that?
that was my same question. And the second thing is there a case study where this has been successful? I mean, I can only think of like the city of Hillsborough who has went in and tried to acquire large pieces for, to attract specific large users who need hundreds of acres, of developable land for a use, and probably the city of Port Portland, has acquired large pieces and then resold them. I mean, are there any other case studies out there in the state of Oregon that where this has been successfully executed?
So in an industrial context, I think you've hit on the two big ones, Port of Portland, who's sort of done a similar program in Gresham and Troutdale and on their own waterfront. And then Hillsborough, Ronler Acres exists basically because Hillsborough did this, 30-40 years ago. Yes, on a much larger scale. We're trying to spin up a Wilsonville scale version of what they accomplished there.
So same program, same bureaucracy of the timeline, or?
None of this, as far as specific process and language, has been borrowed from Hillsborough, only the idea, so to speak.
And I'm an advocate for a tool, another tool in the toolbox that helps economic development. Have some concerns about how you execute it, and then Stu's concerns about, okay, if Schnitzer has a tenant that would build on their property, if they can get two adjacent properties, and how you keep the free market from extorting money out of the situation. That's just like the free market negotiation that may occur in those circumstances. It's the other concern.
I think that's kind of like putting the cart before the horse, because I think the first thing you got to do is you got to get the language approved through council, and then you let the market kind of react and have its process to go through it, right? So like worrying about if it's going to transact or not transact, we're a land plan state, and we put the onus on cities to develop within inside their city boundaries. And until we got to have the tools, at least have the discussion. Right now, we don't have the wording to have the discussion. I mean, but to think about if it's what it's going to sell for, discount that, who's going to develop it, that's the next conversation down the road that I see as a resident. What I see the most important thing is having the language in there so staff and attorneys can start to have the council conversation with the property, right? And then let the market factors in play there. But we don't know what that's going to be. And if we don't do this as a city, we're going to lose jobs. We're going to, Oregon, we're struggling right now. It's easy to see the numbers, what's going on. So we have to, as a city, be looking at adding and giving every tool possible to help us be able to have those conversations.
And I think that Mark's point, though, is important in that we're just trying to get our head around this. So yeah, maybe we've got a few ideas or questions that may come after we enact this, but I think they're still good. And I still want to get back to his first part of his question, which was, what about the existing businesses that are there? Is there a little bit of, they're developing around me, maybe I better make it look a little sharper, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what this does is provide an opportunity, but it doesn't compel anyone to do anything. So if a landowner is pleased and if the tenant of that land is pleased and there's no desire to transact or do anything, the city can't compel them to do that. So it would really, like I started out with by saying, and state law doesn't allow us to do eminent domain or condemned property. That it would only be willing sellers.
I mean, these businesses are really successful businesses. You drive out there and you look at these companies and they're pretty well-known, popular companies, successful. And to Mark's point, that zoning is a zoning that they fit into. It doesn't fit into any other zoning. So if you wanted to, if you wanted outside storage of machinery and lay down yard method, it doesn't really exist other than the zoning that they're in. So unless you can provide them some other area for them to relocate to, I can't imagine why they'd ever want to relocate. It's just too hard to find a site for them to go to. That isn't like, Canby or Woodburn or someplace else. So to Mark's point, none of this is gonna happen unless you figure out a place for them to go.
If they
In
go,
my mind.
that's the point, if they may not go. Susan and then Stu.
And they're looking at how close am I to the freeway for storing equipment and everything and mobility. And they're in Clackamas County. And so Wilsonville, Washington County, pardon me. And so the city of Wilsonville doesn't have the ability to change zoning, just a little bit further out for those to move to. But can you work with Washington County to see if they would consider it, I guess, is my question.
There is a conversation underway at a higher level. Our planning department is working with the city very closely to bring different concepts to address this issue. I know that I just got an update from our community planning director about that. So in the spring, and the city will be involved in those conversations, of course. We've heard the concerns loud and clear.
Yeah, I think it's fair, Stephen, what you're saying, and Mark, what you're saying. There are market forces here at play that we can't. What this does is allow us to execute if an opportunity arises and if there is a willing seller. I imagine in many cases what you're saying will be true. Like, we're happy. We're not going anywhere.
I'm all for the language.
Yeah.
But if they're not the landowner, the owner can choose not to renew.
Correct.
So,
Stu and then Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I agree, I'm all for the language. I mean, it's another tool in the toolbox, I get it, success. Predictions of success, I'm doubtful. I mean, many of these guys are my clients, as you know, and they're embedded there like ticks because they have no place to go. I mean, and I've ran into this situation. I've made offers on land down there, as you know, we went to the tenant with a package to relocate it. Where am I gonna go? Be lucky to go to Woodburn. And it's just, it's a very tough situation for those guys and frankly, the property owners, that have tenants there, they have a captive audience. I mean, these people, if they had to conform to city ordinances in terms of how to operate their business, they'd be out of business. Because they can't pay 5 acres of site, put in a stormwater retention system and follow the development guidelines for the, which are pretty ornate in the city of Wilsonville, we all know. They'd be gone. So I hope it works. I'm just telling you that you're gonna have a lot of problems. And the property owners who don't own the property, have the tenants, like I say, they have a captive audience, and every year we come around and when the lease rolls up or something like that, we increase their rent 5 to 10%, they bellyache about it, and then they run around, and guess what? They can't find anything, so it's a tough situation, but I'm all for the language. It's another tool in the toolbox. Situations change, owners motivations change. It can certainly help.
Yeah, does everyone, this is an obvious question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Does everyone in the room appreciate that the free market would have had Garden Acres developed to 100% capacity? Regardless of what we're doing here today, had there been some willing sellers? I mean, I marched up and down Garden Acres with offers ready and willing to go, and Schnitzer's and Stu and everybody in the room in the brokerage community has done the same. There really are, you know, I know one willing seller, but he's not adjacent to anything, and the bowling alley lots. But I guess I'm trying to say, without eminent domain, what does this really do? I guess it sounds good.
We won't know, until we try, I guess, is where I'm at.
There are other challenges. I mean, if we were able to acquire this property, that'd be great. But you've got zoning and development standard issues that are associated with the Coffee Creek plan. You've got connectivity and circulation issues and infrastructure issues also associated with the Coffee Creek plan. So step one is buying the land, right?
Yeah.
And then we have all these other.
Are you referring to the road layout?
The road layout, the infrastructure layout, the development standards, how many parking spaces, you can have maximum 16 parking spaces between a building and the main street.
I mean, there's so many conflicting goals within the city that have precluded the development of this property.
You got
The only
supporting
savings you got-
streets that dissect all that acreage there would be dissected by streets.
And it's objectionable to many industrial users because they don't want pedestrians walking over their parking areas and their drive lines. And it's onerous on the developer, because of the cost of the road. It takes away from their developable land. I mean, we would have developed the property twice. I've sold that property twice to developers and they haven't developed it because of the roads. And that issue, your building layouts get so skinny and long that they're not economically feasible.
You have your parking areas behind the loading area. Which if you look at Precision that just built, they're a single user, so they can make it work for them. But for what we build, which is flex industrial to accommodate, a broad range of uses, those standards just won't work.
So I want to try to avoid the deep dive into the zoning and policies.
I think we can all agree that we appreciate the direction that it's going.
Yeah.
Especially Schnitzer and having the additional tool in the toolbox. Since it's that, yeah.
But
I
can
agree
the
with
task force approve this language and also recommend to the city council that they reconsider some of the design standards that are getting in the way for this development?
When this comes to the city council, I can certainly let them know that the task force wishes to convey that certain aspects of the Coffee Creek Code be revisited.
This part of the task force does.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone is.
And we can do that. That can be part of it. We're not gonna take like a roll call vote here today. We're gonna just seek consensus and then bring that consensus to the council if the consensus exists. A question, I guess, for Ryan or anyone else in the room that wants to chime in. I hear and I understand the woes about the connectivity and the road infrastructure in the area. My question is, do some of those woes diminish at least incrementally if you have a site that isn't shaped like a bowling?
So we can lay that out and build that. That's fine. Yeah.
So with these bowling alley lots on the east side of Garden Acres, for example, if you had 2 or 3 of these aggregated, it now maybe makes financial sense.
We only need 2.
Whereas with the one bowling alley, it makes no sense.
But you lose a lot of developable area to these roads that we're talking about. What you don't see is a road to the north, a road to the south, and a road going north-south between bisecting and cutting up those rectangular pieces. They call it a supporting street.
Right.
So you're essentially, it's almost like it's a town center design standard, circulation pattern or block pattern. The maximum block pattern is 600 feet. Well, our buildings are 600 feet. You know, you gotta work in your landscape, your parking, and then you get to the building, right? So, yeah, we strongly recommend revisiting the development standards and circulation pattern. Not just here, but also what we're talking about Basalt Creek, because in the latest version of the Basalt Creek is Coffee Creek and Basalt Creek become one zone with the same standards. So, and what staff has done so far is they've copied the Coffee Creek standards and pasted them to the Basalt Creek area. So the whole area is gonna have the same development standards and circulation issues that we're running into down here up there. And so it's gonna, not only does it make developing Coffee Creek difficult, it's gonna make developing Basalt Creek difficult. So-
Yeah, the two areas suffer from the same challenges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Susan's got a comment, and then we'll see if we have any other comments before we can see if we have consensus to move forward with the language. Please.
So I'm hearing from the professionals that have been dealing with this, that the obstacle is not necessarily the inability for the city to aggregate land. It's more the circulation and design standards and that kind of thing. Maybe both would be helpful. And also a place to relocate the existing businesses. And if Washington County is working with the city, I think we also need to not be adding onerous development issues like Stu was talking about if it's relocated, because right now they're grandfathered in kind of in an old-fashioned manner, but if they're needing to relocate, can we not create barriers for the landowner, the new landowner, to have to develop that land to be, for that tenant to be able to move? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that would be, not to pass the buck, but I'm gonna pass the buck. I mean, that would be a Washington County,
But in the city's conversation,
yeah.
you could be saying, our goal is to get these relocated. We don't want to create a nuisance, but we also don't want to create barriers. And that you as a city is, asking for that cooperation.
Stephen, before we go here, I just want to point out one other idiosyncrasy of this area. The Washington County zone that applies to this area and Basalt Creek is a zone called FD20, Future Development. And in a lot of places peripheral to the UGB, the prevailing zoning is EFU, exclusive farm use, which carries a pretty low value.
Hard to change.
Basically impossible. And so the transition of those properties from EFU to industrial or urban development is a natural evolution. Here we have this FD20 zone, which has created a real situation. I'll just leave the commentary at that.
My question is back to this language. Does it allow for you to use some of those funds to like incentivize users or developers? Instead of overpaying for some land and to market, could you offer some incentives to like precision countertops that just went in? Can we use those funds for something like that?
With this language, no. Could you do that with urban renewal, generally speaking? Sure, but we'd be in another meeting discussing another amendment here.
Well, can you add it to this amendment?
Well, the second I scribble it in.
Well, no, the second paragraph would be relocation assistance.
Sorry, what'd you say?
The second paragraph would be relocation assistance. You could utilize funds for that.
So relocation assistance is actually already written into the urban renewal plan. It's state statute. So if a tenant were to make a claim for displacement assistance, then that would be a discussion that would have to take place before a transaction could.
So I just want anybody else here or anyone online that we haven't had a chance to hear from? I just want to summarize that here we are 10 years into a 30-year plan, and we've had a little action. So just adding some opportunity to aggregate some of the property, I think is the next best step. Knowing that there's still a lot of work that still needs to be considered, and maybe things we can consider this task force to make it to continue to make it or try to make it easier for them. Any other comment?
I would say intuitively to me, it would be the easiest to get some traction on those, what everybody's calling bowling alley sites. If you could deal with some of the infrastructure that are required, like if you get rid of Kinston or something like that, and because there's nobody to displace for the most part on those sites. So it seems like it would be easiest to start from there and work on that and build some momentum from, taking the path of least resistance and trying to move somebody.
I think Kingsman has been removed, but
How is it?
It has.
Yeah, the guy that can't.
Oh, the guy that can't speak?
I've never heard that.
Yeah, we're not aware that Kinsman's been,
let me follow up on that.
so I'm pretty sure it goes through our site to the north as
It
well.
does.
Yeah. So if you get rid of that, that would help.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
But it still gives you the narrow.
Yeah.
Bill.
Okay, so are we in consensus that we can add the language to the plan, take it to the council for consideration? I think that's February, no, our next meeting,
February 2nd.
February 2nd. All right.
Is that a motion?
Yeah, we're not,
We don't.
so we're not a standing committee, we don't really take binding votes, it's really just kind of a
Head nod or-
get the hive mind
head nod.
activated, yeah.
Okay,
Can't hurt.
all right. Let's try to move it forward.
Do no harm.
Good discussion, everyone. I appreciate that. All right, let's move on to our second agenda item. We are, those of you, as you get to know me, you'll see I'm a person that likes to stick to a timeline because I respect all of your time. So let's move on to agenda item number 2. We do have planned until 4 o'clock. If we finish early, great. If not, we'll take it all the way to 4. And Matt, number 2.
Thanks. So Wilsonville Investment Now, our WIN program is Wilsonville's response to not being able to have an enterprise zone in the city. None of our census tracts are eligible, and so it's been difficult to compete from an incentive standpoint with other jurisdictions that can offer enterprise zone tax abatement. So Wilsonville Investment Now is an urban renewal program that allows us to identify a single property as an urban renewal area and to rebate the tax increment to the owner / user, the taxpayer, as an incentive for capital investment, job creation, and the wages of those jobs, as well as a couple other incidental categories, which I'll mention in just a moment. So think of it as an enterprise zone if you're familiar with those. It's not an abatement, but it is a rebate. So the applicant applies, is approved under the program, they meet their criteria, and the city verifies that. We collect the tax increment as part of our annual collections through the county and then rebate back minus an administrative fee, the amount to the taxpayer. So when we met in 2022 in conjunction with the development of the strategic plan, there were 2 recommendations that came out of that. One of those was that Wilsonville businesses that have had skin in the game in this community for a long time ought to be able to score more points for being investors in this community. Right now, they max out at 4 points in that category and score a half point for each year they've been in business. So I should use my slides that I made. So you can see that category highlighted. You see the other point scoring categories, and then at the bottom, you see the total amounts that an applicant has to score in order to be eligible. The program was created in 2020, and since that time has had 1 successful application with Twist Bioscience on Printer Parkway, the former Tektronix campus, for those that are familiar. The question before the task force today, nope, I'm getting ahead of myself, is so the recommendation, let me back up to the recommendation. to allow for a higher score for longtime existing Wilsonville businesses. The task force at that time did not specify what the maximum should be, or if that 0.5 amount should be adjusted. So it's one question with two parts. Should they score more than a half a point for each year in business? And the second piece, should they be allowed to score more than 4 points? And if so, how many as a maximum? So it's hard to maybe have that conversation without context. So if you look at the top line where a company's going to score most of their points, they're getting a point for every $500,000 of investment. So for $20 million investment, they're scoring 40 points. And then they're going to add some additional points through some of the other areas, usually through job creation. But then these DEI areas and the local business tenure tends to be something that either tips them into eligibility, or from one level of eligibility, the 4-year program, into the next year threshold of eligibility, the 7-year program. Twist Bioscience invested $70 million, and it's actually turned out to be more than that in their facility, and so they didn't even need any of these other categories. But that just kind of grounds you, I guess, in the conversation. So I realize it's a hard conversation to start from scratch, but what feels like the question to this group is, what feels like a responsible recommendation for either adjusting the maximum allowable points and or the points scored in this category?
My question is, so let's just say it's an existing company, they've been here for 10 years. This is if they want to make a bigger investment, and then, or is it too retroactive?
Yeah, so it's not retroactive. This would be like an expansion to their current site, or perhaps if like Precision Countertops is an interesting case study, except for the fact that they went into Coffee Creek, an existing urban renewal area, and we can't use this in an existing urban renewal area. But let's say Precision had moved to a non-urban renewal area. That would be a fantastic example of a Wilsonville business that's moving and expanding, and they would be able to score points in this cat.
I guess, have we missed out on someone using this because there weren't more points for long-term?
Not that I'm aware of. We do have a preliminary conversation incidentally going on right now with a local company that is looking to apply for the program. This conversation started long before 2022, before we received this inquiry from them. So it's not influenced by that in any way. But I'm not aware of us missing opportunities here. This was sort of a value-based recommendation from the task force in 2022. Hey, we don't want to just pull in companies from South San Francisco. We want to incentivize our local homegrown businesses to stay here as well.
John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was looking at this and, again, trying to keep the businesses that we have here and helping them expand. I really think we should think about adjusting the yearly maximum points. I don't think 4 should be the maximum. I actually think we should consider like a tiered step up. So if you've been here, if you said 10 years, you've been here, you get 4 points. Well, that's probably a pretty good company that we got here in my city. And I think we should really think about having a tiered step up that, it's a city that we should probably be thinking about, I think we should have a higher tier if you've been here 5, 10, 15 years. That's usually a company, we hate to lose Coca-Cola. Let's just think about that. Like, if they want to expand somewhere or do more, we should really be thinking about keeping them within our city. I think we lost, I don't know where Lamb went, but, that's a perfect example of like, maybe if we had a stronger incentive program to keep that company here, we wouldn't lose them. So I really think we should think about that. I don't know, maybe it's open to thinking about too, like what the point strategy is at the bottom too. But anyway, I really think we should tier if you've been here 5, 10 years, it should be tiered up a lot higher, because that's a company that we probably would want to keep here. They've been investing in our community for a while.
What's the reward?
What's the incentive?
What's the, yeah, what is it?
A tax rebate.
Tax rebate
Yeah,
on
so they're-
property taxes, that's what my question.
Their property, and remember that in the state of Oregon, fixed equipment and machinery is taxed as real property as well.
So that's where.
It's not just the four walls and the
It's
toilets.
the tax rebate, what if the company doesn't own the property?
Then so companies that, like a distribution center, for example, is probably not going to meet threshold criteria. And even if they did, like, let's say they were gonna bring in 500 employees to run a massive operation, distribution operation. If they're not investing a lot in that, then there's not gonna be much tax increment associated with that project. Right, like, if they move their business into it and they only put $250,000 into that building to add some racking. Then there's no benefit to them to apply for the program, and the city's not interested in incentivizing that. Not that we think it's bad, it's just not that what we're trying to incentivize.
But Collins Aerospace is a tenant you like Columbia Business Center, Columbia Distributing, EW Fritz Manufacturing, I mean, those companies are all tenants, they're not owners.
Oh, but it passes through.
It's triple.
So it passed through and
Yeah.
they're tripping that, that's okay.
So, yeah,
Just like
Twist,
nonprofit.
Twist is a tenant as well, but they're
Yeah,
beneficiaries
right,
in this program.
And if they're in a multi-tenant building, that proportion would go to them.
It's all worked out by the assessor's office, but yes, the urban renewal area boundary for the Twist plan is literally just the space that they have leased
All
from
right, so that's a
SKP.
perfect example.
Other comments?
Yes, there's one question, I think, when having the conversation around, you know, job creation versus retention is, which is, I think, potentially, you know, a sub criteria here that could be something that's included in evaluation guidelines that staff do, which is thinking about, you know, what are maybe there's a tier of different levels of employee retention that are occurring, because there's always the question of, but for, would this company close but for a tax abatement? What if they said? So it's something that could be, you know, included in more of the evaluation criteria potentially, but could help the city identify what are the trade-offs there.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I think the question I have about that is that because an enterprise zone is a wholesale abate.
Yeah.
We can't match that exactly here. We offer a rebate of the increment, and the increment is only that value that is added on top of what already exists when they occupy. So I get what you're saying about retention, but if there isn't CapEx associated with that,
Right.
there's nothing to rebate to them.
Right? It just gets into this kind of philosophical conversation of what is the type of business that you're trying to retain,
Right.
so business tenure. If depending on the goal of the program overall.
Suppose you can also make the argument that it seems like most CapEx is for automation, which reduces jobs. It's true.
I think it's a valid point, I guess. I'm sorry. Well, I mean, so, I mean,
Does enhance
the
health.
goal of, as I stated earlier, one of the goals of urban renewal is to bolster and grow the tax base. So it does make sense that there's some emphasis placed on taxable investment. Jobs are important, but the city doesn't derive any revenue from job creation. Not that we don't think holistically and want to be partners with the state and support the state's budget, because that benefits us too, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying.
The purposes of this were anyway. Go ahead, please.
When this state of the economy in many ways has shifted for a lot of Oregon towns, particularly Portland and metro area, for mass exodus out of Oregon. And my observation for Wilsonville is we've done pretty well. We haven't been hit too hard by that. I know our office building's 100% full. There's not a lot of office buildings that can say that. Because people want to be in Wilsonville. And as I look at industrial property, I'm not seeing tons of vacancy. And so I guess I'm taking a pause saying, some other communities might want to enhance this more beyond just keeping existing, but do more to try to attract businesses from other states or towns. And I guess my question is, am I right in thinking that we don't need to tweak this too much because Wilsonville doesn't have as significant, that things haven't changed significantly, or am I wrong?
I guess I would look to the brokers in the room to speak to real vacancy rates. I think the latest report I saw said that we were around 5%.
Which is helpful.
So this program was first created in an earlier iteration during the depth of the Great Recession,
Right.
where there was big industrial vacancy and the city was trying to incentivize filling those.
Right.
We've iterated on that and sort of modernized it, and this is the form it lives in today. So do we have big issues we're trying to solve with this program? I would say generally no, but there are opportunities to use it, and I just think we do want to be positioned well when the opportunity arrives. So I was hired in late 2021, and for a long time, Twist was the only application we had entertained. And just in the past 6 months, we have now 2 ongoing conversations with potential projects. So I don't know that necessarily means the trajectory is going to continue, but all I'm saying is there are opportunities to use it, and we want to feel good about our criteria when.
Oh, thank you.
Nick, can you speak to us?
I can, yeah. Just maybe a few comments more so than a question per se, but just doing the quick math here to help me get a better sense of what the local business tenure criteria actually means. So any expansion or new investment of any kind into an eligible part of Wilsonville that's over $40 million immediately gets the full benefits per the capital investment criteria at the very top. So really, all the other, in my mind, all the other criteria below capital investment is focused on those smaller investments, including local business tenure. So, and just thinking about what a lot of these industrial developments, especially, with lots of expensive machinery and equipment, what they look like these days, how capital intensive they are. Something like that local business tenure criteria is really targeting small to medium-sized businesses that are expanding per the previous comments too. It's less about retention, it's more about incenting Wilsonville businesses to grow in place or to grow in a neighboring parcel or within city limits. I do think, though, that just the quick math on the details there, it's you're maxing out once you've operated in Wilsonville for 8 years, and I do like the idea of this being more impactful, for every decade, perhaps that you've done business in Wilsonville, as opposed to hitting that ceiling at 8 years. So I guess the question would be, considering who the audience is, again, companies expanding that aren't necessarily looking to spend more than $40 million on that expansion. How does this actually move the needle for them? Is it the incentive? Is it creating the impact? I think that the incentive is hoping that it creates for the local businesses in Wilsonville who are expanding or could be expanding. So just some quick thoughts there.
Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to respond to the question? Comment?
I think that was more comments than it was question, right, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay.
Josh.
Yeah, Josh, please.
Josh.
Matt, Councilor Shevlin, thanks for having me here. Just some thoughts, no questions here either. But Matt, you may recall a couple of years ago, you and I sat down to talk about this very program as I was representing a business new to Wilsonville. I think a good idea, just as far as a lens to use, if this is going to be reconsidered, is a business lined out that hits all of the high notes on this sheet that's in front of me here and in front of you all is very much a unicorn type of business that's asking for incredibly high wages above the average county wage. A lot of sort of infrastructure on DEI and the sort of stuff that a business if they have the time to work on will. I think most of them. But I would encourage the city to look at something that also takes into account like what a baseline for a business coming to town would look like. Wilsonville is a very attractive place to place a business and be with the freeway, just sort of the positioning in the metro. But if you're looking at sort of encouraging folks to consider your town, maybe a baseline that doesn't start with what a sort of perfect business might look like, that could work as sort of a recruitment tool. This is really good, and I know that there have to be metrics around who would get to participate in the WIN program. But I think considering the timing right now as well, a lot of businesses would like to be there and like to benefit from a program like this, but just with the bar set where it is, may not be able to. Just a couple of comments there. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Nick, did you have further comments?
I did. I actually do have a question directed at Matt, if it's okay. Matt, based on the active and prospective program participants, could you give us a sense of how that applicant pool is split between partial benefit versus full benefit award, even if it's just preliminary conversations? I'm just curious, where did businesses tend to land in this scoring criteria, and would a couple points difference really, push a big segment of a group into that, full benefits category or not?
Yeah, it's a little challenging to respond to, but so one applicant, both applicants are in manufacturing, two different types of manufacturing. One will probably easily qualify because it's related to a building expansion with significant costs. The other is a retrofit of an existing property and may not qualify as easily because their ability to qualify, as Josh just pointed out, is driven largely by their capital investment. So don't have enough information yet to know where they fall, but it will be one of those that may be affected by something like this, although they're not an existing Wilsonville company. but the categories besides CapEx become relevant, as was noted for the smaller and medium-sized businesses that aren't investing as much.
Any other comments? Matt, do you have enough information do you feel like you can move forward with the proposed changes with just adding the half point under local business tenure, or do you feel like with some of the information or feedback you've received today that having a 3-3-1?
Well, what I'd love is a more concrete recommendation that I could bring to the city council for them to say, yeah, we're on board, without having to debate it at length. So does that mean increasing to a maximum of 8 with 1 point each per year? Like if we can get to that level of specificity, John mentioned maybe structuring it as a tiered system. If we can just add some flesh to that in the small amount of time we have left, that would bring me something more, give me something more concrete I can bring to the council.
Well, if you had your druthers, what do you want to see? I mean, you work in this all day.
Yeah.
Every day. This is your world. I mean, what's your recommendation for what's the biggest bang for the buck? And to get more businesses, not just the 1 or 2 or 3 that you've gotten over since 2021.
Right.
I think we want more businesses that, you know, maybe the amount of points is too high or something. How do we get more people to qualify?
Yeah, it's an art and a science. I don't know that this category alone is going to be a game changer. It is just that sort of incremental needle mover that may move them into eligibility or from one level to the next. So it's striking a balance between being responsible on the generous side and just this is probably currently structured a little bit stingy, right? So how do we strike that balance? You know, in my mind, something like a tiered system like John was suggesting kind of makes sense. The problem with the tiered system, however, though, is that you inevitably are going to get that company that's right on the cusp. And, you know, if they were in business 1 year more, then they get this other benefit. So being able to do it year by year is maybe more attractive from that perspective. Maybe there's a bonus for hitting the decade mark.
Yeah, 5 and 10 year decade mark.
I think increasing the points for capital investment
I agree with that too.
is where you really need to be.
Both those, yeah. Because we're trying to keep them here and
Point per cap.
and then maybe lower the scoring down here. Maybe it's a new scoring too.
60 points seems like a lot of points.
Yeah, when you look at, I went to like.
Yeah.
Maybe let's go to 50 and then 50 to 70 and then try 70 to 80. Make it 2 points per 500,000. 1 point per year, bonus it 5 years, 10 years.
So if we go that route, and we can, probably what I need to do is go back to council and say, your task force is telling you they want to reevaluate the scoring system wholesale. And then schedule another meeting with you all, come back at this.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
support it.
I would add to the DEI section, because this is, you know, I think Josh made a point. I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow that so that different ways that different employers are approaching DEI in terms of like mobility and upward mobility and opportunities for their employees to grow could be included a little bit more clearly.
Okay. All right.
Another reason to open it up.
Would it be helpful, Matt, for, do you want to either watch the recording or do you want folks that have got some ideas to just send you email with more detail, what they like to see?
I mean, I'll definitely be going back through the recording to capture minutes from this. But certainly if you're sitting here feeling like you've got the secret sauce, send it my way. But I'm hearing that we want more points scored by capital investment in order to sort of lower the bar a little bit for entry. And then to maybe come to you with a recommendation for how to structure the business tenure point system. And that seems doable.
And maybe foster the diversity and lower
Lower the points for DEI?
No,
Oh,
the benefits at the bottom,
okay.
maybe adjusted from
Benefits.
50 to 60 or, you know. Kind of
So
tweak the whole thing a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
We're trying to give you another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, no, this is great, and I'm gonna go into council. The conversation I'm gonna have with council, just so you know, is that there is an administrative burden associated with doing this over and over and over and over and over again. There's the bar is set high somewhat intentionally. How high is reasonable is the question that we really need to
And
get.
how much do we need this?
Yeah, but then you get to go to city council with all these wins.
Yeah.
Look, we got another one. I want to stay.
Yeah.
The big project, it's property specific, so you identify the properties, it's not just,
The applicant identifies the property.
oh no, they come for you.
Yeah.
So no works.
Oh, I have a question. In the materials, you mentioned adding a public comment period, and I couldn't read in between the lines why that suggestion was coming out and why you would add in another burden of proof for an applicant to come in on this to get this incentive. Can you talk through?
Yeah, so that's the last piece. Thank you for the segue.
Okay.
I share your concern. But what we heard from our task force in 2022 was that when Twist was applying, and it came to light that a bioscience company was looking at locating in Wilsonville in the middle of a global pandemic, there was some concern that came out of it. And the question was, why didn't we find out about this sooner? Why can't we have more say in this? And so the task force, 2022 was on the heels of the pandemic, right? We're a few years past that trauma now, but it was fresh then, and they were saying maybe there needs to be an opportunity to vet a company a little bit before it proceeds directly to a development agreement. A development agreement is the mechanism we use to offer consent. So that's what was driving it. The recommendation was going as far as maybe even a public open house. What I said in the memo is that I discouraged us from going that direction for reasons of confidentiality, just the clumsy nature of it in general. It slows down what is supposed to be a nimble and expeditious process. So my recommendation is to set that aside, but do we want to introduce a step where the city's standing committees could at least receive some information about the company, name redacted or subject to non-disclosure agreement, where they could raise concerns or ask questions that the council would consider before going straight to a DA?
My concern is you're opening it up to subjective and value-driven conclusions. I think this should be a pretty objective criteria system.
I kind of agree with that. So we're not saying, here's an incentive only if we like you. Or a few individuals, don't object.
Yeah. I'll just say for the record that there is, because this is an urban renewal program, it's inherently political to some degree because the council has to approve it. An enterprise zone is something that's set up through rules and staff just processes an application and you're either in or you're not.
Okay.
So there is something political inherent in this process.
Okay.
But I would also agree that by adding this, we're injecting even more subjectivity into it.
So the scoring criteria basically just gets you in front of the city council where you get approval or not?
Sure.
Yeah, then that's the place for the public comment. I don't know if you need the public comment. I just wrote the city council.
But it could be in that, like, work session, right? It doesn't have to be in that open.
Work sessions are public meetings. They're not well attended,
But there's no public
There's no
opportunity
comment,
for
then they
public.
can make comment.
Right.
They can make a comment during the council.
Oh, you're right. It's a public meeting, but public comment is during the regular business.
So you still need to capture it that way. The only concern you had was on the tails of the pandemic and Twist Bioscience. I almost wonder if we're adding a step that maybe we wouldn't see it till the next pandemic.
I think the only instance I can think of that comes to mind where we might run into concerns from the public. A run-of-the-mill manufacturer is not going to raise alarms for it. But let's say that a company has connections to China or some other geopolitical sensitivity. That's another area where I could see potentially it becoming.
And we wouldn't be having heavy industrial or something.
I'm sorry, could you clarify?
It's not like somebody's coming in that would do a lot of polluting.
Right, the city standards don't
Because
really.
it doesn't allow that, but what about somebody that needs a lot of power, for instance? Does the city have other ways to say, no, we don't want you, if they come saying they want to do this? So the city council can say, no, we want to object to this server farm because of how much power they would be consuming.
I'm getting a little bit outside my wheelhouse, but the development review board makes those decisions based on clear and objective criteria, and like power needs that's a private
So it could
utility.
be objected to at that level.
Someone could, yeah, definitely attend a DRB hearing and raise concerns for sure. But the city's ability to decline someone based on use would be just, we don't have enough water to provide you, or our sewer system can't handle your discharge, or whatever happens.
Or, but what if they're taking too big a bite of the apple for future development? Do you know what I mean? Cause like Canby has run out of power. They can no longer have big power users come in. They're limping along for residential development. So it's not outside the realm of, you know, what could happen
Sure.
in the future.
So does leaving this or adopting this, it puts another check in place. But we don't want it to be cumbersome for first one. Sure.
The language is a little, I think, broad in terms of city council and the city standing committee and the urban renewal task force. I'm just curious at what point is that? I don't feel like from the public perspective, there's a clear opportunity to provide feedback. And I'm not as familiar with that.
Yeah, it's intentionally not opening it to the public, but rather a representation of the public on the city's committees.
Yes, yeah, just seems quite broad. And in the case of, seems like the city council in and of itself is representative of that. So if there was a way to ensure that there was some, like somebody mentioned earlier, the general meeting where, yeah, the council include that a little bit more clearly, that seems, I just am concerned that this opens it up a little.
Okay.
I echo with, Lauren's thoughts down there, you know. I think there's a process that we have in place, for the citizen wants to come and talk about that, they can do it at the urban renewal meeting or city council. This is just another step that, you know, that we put in the pipeline that I think we have to not do, because the more challenges we make it for a business to try and do business in our city, the more, you know, they're just gonna check the box and go to the next county or next state or next state. And this is something that I mean, we can't keep adding and layering these. Next thing will be the HOA has to approve it up here. You know, and it just, we're just, this is ridiculous. in my
But do
mind,
we
so.
agree that the city council,
But they're the ones that make the ultimate decision for the development, right? So that's if you have if
So
you as
it's
if
happening.
I as a citizen have an issue, show up to the city council and talk to them there, but for us to weigh in on it and then the business, it's just another cog in our pipeline that we have in order to get people development to happen here. And I'm sorry, but we're more streamlining it, and I echo Laura's comment down.
So do folks to hear, they feel like we should not add this to our current process? How many people like this? Let's ask it like that.
Or like
That,
Adding an additional step to the approval process.
nobody, okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's not my pet project. It came out of the last iteration of the task force.
Okay.
But we give you credit for bringing it forward, especially.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
been a couple of years since it's even been discussed.
thank you.
And we'll let the council know
Yeah.
that that was the consensus of this group, and if they feel strongly otherwise, then they'll direct staff, but.
Yeah.
We'll bring the recommendation forward,
Good.
which is to let it be.
Well, we're past our time, but you were gonna mention something about Townsend,
Uh,
or you wanna?
I can be very brief and just say that I think most of the folks here know that the advisory vote on an urban renewal area in town center failed by a narrow margin in 2024. The city council is doing some public outreach, and it may appear on a future ballot, but that's at the discretion of the council, but that's where it stands today. Last week, I presented some preliminary findings to the council about the Salt Creek and the infrastructure needs there and our ability to finance those through SDCs. The identification of a gap and the potential exploration of urban renewal to fill that gap. And there was broad consensus on the council to further explore the Salt Creek urban renewal. So that may be a meeting that we schedule here in the not too distant future with this group.
So it'd be a very active year for us. which is great. Anybody else, any comments online or anyone here in the room? Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's good to get to know each of you and appreciate your time, your comments and. look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then.
All right, thank you for those online, bye.
Thank you.